Hello, my name is Nigel Stott, and in this video we're going to take a look at the compliance features in Microsoft 365. I'm a technology consultant with Baskerville Drummond, working as a virtual CTO and IT director for law firms, as well as having a specialism in Microsoft 365. To touch on compliance around Microsoft 365, so we're seeing many law firms implementing Microsoft 365, or indeed there's a number of firms that have already implemented the technology. But what is surprising is that a relatively small number of those firms have considered the compliance implications of implementing the technology. To take a step back for a second and look at the collaboration capabilities in Microsoft 365, many firms are already using tools such as OneDrive, SharePoint and Teams to collaborate both internally and externally as well. However, there are some risks that firms need to be aware of, and the Microsoft 365 compliance toolset helps firms address some of these. Microsoft 365 comes with a range of tools to help firms manage their data and access to the Microsoft 365 environment. Just talking about some of the risks that we see around using the toolset. So I think the first thing to say on this is there is absolute value in using Microsoft 365 tools. So as we mentioned before, we're seeing many firms now using Microsoft Teams, making good use of OneDrive, Microsoft Exchange Online and SharePoint. But quite often these tools are used for things such as file sharing. So if your fee earners or support staff are sharing files externally, there are risks around that. Do we have visibility of what's been shared and who that has been shared with? How long are those files available for? Guest access, so depending on how the Microsoft 365 environment has been configured, it is possible to allow external guests into the environment to participate in Teams, or again have direct access to files or folders in OneDrive and SharePoint. The other thing that needs to be kept an eye on is intrusion attempts. So by now, if you are using Microsoft 365, you should have implemented multi-factor authentication. But how do we know what intrusion attempts are taking place on the system? So we need a way of monitoring and logging that kind of information as well. Subject access requests are things that law firms may have had to deal with already. So subject access requests, or SARs, from clients or employees. But again, with so much data in Microsoft 365, how do we collate all that data together and present back for a subject access request? And in a similar vein, litigation, if we're asked to provide details around emails or files or conversations, how can we easily, from a compliance viewpoint, gain access to that data and search it and find exactly what it is we need? So to touch on, first of all, we're going to look at the auditing and alerts capability in the compliance area of Microsoft 365. So I think one of the key things to remember around this is that Microsoft 365 contains auditing capability. So essentially what we mean by that is activities and actions that are carried out by administrators and users can be logged, stored centrally and searched against. The key thing to remember here is that user and admin activity is recorded in the audit log and retained for 90 days, which can be up to 1 year depending on the type of Microsoft 365 license that is held. One of the other things that we need to keep in mind about auditing and alerts is that it can take up to 30 minutes or 24 hours after an event occurs for the corresponding audit log record to be returned in the results of an audit log search. So there is a slight lag that we need to be aware of there as well. But the auditing capability in Microsoft 365, essentially it provides us with a number of categories to search against. So for example, if we want to see when a user was given elevated permissions, or when a file was deleted or shared externally. They're the types of things that we can gather from the auditing logs. Alerts are a slightly different thing. So alerts allows us to set email notification alerts or display an alert in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center or the 365 Defender portal when certain criteria is met. So essentially an administrator will create, configure and turn on an alert policy. What the user would then need to do is do something that matches the conditions of the alert policy. So a really good example of that is, again, external file sharing. If I want to be notified whenever a user shares an external file, I can set up an alert to do this, so I get an automatic email notification to my inbox to tell me when a file has been shared on that external basis. Really useful for keeping track of some of the higher risk actions that can be carried out in the environment. Moving on then to another compliance feature, which is advanced eDiscovery. So all law firms will have come across eDiscovery tools, and again, depending on the type of Microsoft license you hold, you may have access to the advanced eDiscovery tooling. Essentially what this is a capability that allows me to search all the content contained in the Microsoft 365 environment against specific keywords, dates, identify data that has been stored in specific mailboxes, identify, for example, emails that have been sent to certain recipients. The list goes on and on. It's not just data in the Microsoft 365 environment that can be searched using advanced eDiscovery. There are ways of uploading data into Azure and using advanced eDiscovery against that. So if you have files in file shares or network folders, then that information can be uploaded to Microsoft 365 and searched against as well. The process for using advanced eDiscovery is relatively straightforward. Essentially, we create an eDiscovery case. We'll add custodians to that case. Custodians are essentially those individuals that hold the data we wish to search against. We'll then collect the content from the data sources we want to search against. So in Microsoft 365, generally speaking, this could be email data stored in mailboxes. It could be files stored in SharePoint or OneDrive, or it could even be Microsoft Teams messages. And the important thing to remember about that is if staff are using Microsoft Teams to send instant messages, they do need to appreciate that that data is collected and can be searched against as well. Once all the information has been searched against from the relevant data sources via standard search criteria, that is then put into what we call a review set. Once the data is in the review set, then further detailed analysis can be performed on that data. So we can again further filter that data based on specific keywords, dates, users, whether the file has a specific attachment of a certain file type. We can tag that data, and we can also download that data as well if we need to share it with any third parties. Moving on to sensitivity labels. So essentially sensitivity labels allow for containers and data to be protected with things such as encryption by putting watermarks into documents and adding restrictions to external user access, which is especially useful in the case of Microsoft 365 groups and Microsoft 365 Teams. Using something called Azure Purview, sensitivity labels can also be used to protect data that exists in Power BI and also SQL databases. So what we would recommend as the next steps for law firms around compliance. So what we would say, first of all, is identify the key risk areas around your Microsoft 365 deployment. So for example, are your users sharing files and documents externally? Do we allow guest access into Microsoft Teams? What we need to look what we need to do then is look at applying the necessary controls using the Microsoft 365 compliance tools we've spoken about in this video. And of course, perform regular reviews on what's happening in your 365 environment using the auditing and alerts feature. If you have any queries or questions about compliance in Microsoft 365, then don't hesitate to get in touch. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon in the next video.